Today I would like to talk about how to harmonize the whole melody. So as you can see, there are two phrases. So that means there are two cadence points. So when harmonizing, you must do the cadence points first, and then do the bass part and adding the inner parts. So that's how you take a procedure when harmonizing. And so there are several rules that you need to remember before you start harmonizing. Try to keep the soprano and the bass moves in a contrary motion. So if the soprano moves up, try to keep the bass note moves down. All right. If the soprano moves down, try to keep the bass note moves up. So that way you can avoid consecutive fifths and octaves. For major chord, you usually double the root or the fifth. For minor chord, you can basically double any notes you want, but most common way is to double the third. So when you have two first inversion chord in a row, try to double different notes, and maybe you can also try to use a different position of the chord. So don't end up having same type of chord, same position of the chord in a row. So let's start with the cadence point first. So we are in key of B flat major. So that is B. So we ending with the chord number 1. And how about the chord number before that? So B, C, D, E, F. Okay, so that is chord number 5. So that is perfect cadence. How about we analyze the cadence type of the first phrase? So this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. So that is the fifth chord, B, C, D, E, F. All right, so fifth chord. So we're going to end up having imperfect cadence. And then the chord before, always the best option to lead to chord 5 is supertonic first inversion chord. Okay, so we're done with the analysis of the cadence point. Now we'll start building up the cadence points. Okay, all right, so let's write down the chord tones of the tonic triad. So B, D, fifth chord, B, C, D, E, F. So F, A, C, and F. All right, so the C and then B are already given, so we're gonna get rid of that first. Okay, all right, and then the root goes to the bass. So F, and then the B. Okay, we're done with the root. Okay, and then you tick. All right, and then the seventh note lead to tonic. All right, so what is the seventh note of a B flat? So that's A. So we're gonna include the A in the tenor, followed by tonic B. Okay, all right. But here you end up having B 3 times by tripling the root. Okay, so you have 3 B's. Okay, and then that's it. And so you get rid of that A and B, and then whatever's left, F and D. So F and then D. Okay, and so we finish with the final cadence point. And then now let's move on to the first phrase to finish up with imperfect cadence. So imperfect cadence, so the fifth chord, B, C, D, E, F. All right, so F chord, F, A, C, and then F. All right, and then supertonic first inversion. So C, E, G, and then we're doubling the third. Okay, all right, so let's do the root first. So the E, the third, is going to be on the bass. All right, so E goes there. All right, and then the F, the root, goes to the bass. All right, we finish, we tick. All right, and what if the notes given, we're going to also tick. So C is already there, A is there. All right, so to the fifth, right, you double the third of the supertonic first inversion chord, and then the remaining voice must move to the nearest neighbor. Okay, so G, let's say, followed by F. Okay, done, and then E, followed by C. Okay, so we're done with the supertonic first inversion to fifth imperfect cadence. Now we need to add the bass part. So in order to do that, we're writing down the chord tones of each note, all right, of the melody. All right, so supertonic first inversion is always a great option to lead to the fifth chord. So I'm going to include the supertonic chord here again, all right, but I would say first inversion, yeah, not root position. Okay, and then, okay, so we're writing down the chord tones here. Supertonic, C, E, G, and double the third. Okay, and then I'm going to include the third, okay, on the bass because this is the first inversion. Okay, so E, Okay, now we're doing the chord, for this one, I would say, okay, which chord that contains the E? B, C, D, E. Okay, and then B, C, D, E, F, G, G, B, D. Fourth, okay, G, B, C, D, E. Okay, I want to use chord number 4 here. All right, chord number 4. So B, C, D, E. So E chord is E, G, B. Here I would say I want to double the root. Okay, all right, and then B here, D, E, F, G. So G chord also contains the B. So here I want to use chord number 6. All right, so B, C, D, E, F, G. G chord, G, B, D, and then for the 6th chord, I want to double. I want to double the root this time. Okay. All right. And now we'll move on to the first phrase and writing down the chord tones. You have to decide the chord type first and then writing down the chord tones. So this one, always good to have a tonic triad in the first measure, but try to have them in a different position or try to double different notes so you don't end up having same chord, same type, and then same position of the chord in a row, you know. So here is one. I want to use maybe like first inversion here, and then tonic triad, the root position, and then starts with tonic triad, first inversion again. So make sure you don't have the same type of chord in a row. Okay, so this is the chord number 1, first inversion. Okay. Okay, so this is major. All right, so that is B flat. Okay, so B, D, F. All right, so B, D, F, and then B. Okay, this one the same thing. I'm trying to maybe double different notes, doubling the 5th, and then the first inversion chord. Maybe here I want to double the 3rd, like that. So try to double different notes, okay? When you have the same type of chord, all right? Okay. Okay. So now let's add the bass part. Okay. So bass part here we're starting off with the supertonic chord. Okay. So that's a C, E, G. So the bass I already did. Okay. And then you tick C already there, and this is E, G, B, E. So root goes to the bass. Okay. You're done, and then E. You're done. Okay, so this is a G, B, D, G. So B is already there. And then root goes to the bass. Finish. All right. Okay, so now we'll move on to the first measure. So chord number 1. So B, D, F, and then the B. But we have to include the 3rd on the bass because it's the first inversion. So I'm trying to keep the D, the 3rd on the bass. And then D, done. And then B already there. So I'm going to tick. All right, so next one, B, D, F, F. We wanted to double the 5th. So D is already there, okay? And then the B is on the bass. You finish, okay? Now the first chord, the first inversion. So you're gonna have the D on the bass because it's the first inversion again, and they got rid of it. All right, so now we're trying to add the inner part. When you're adding the inner part, make sure that you don't have a big leaps between the notes. So try to have the inner part sounds boring. So that is the way that you can avoid consecutive fifths and octave, and then try to include repeated notes in the inner part, okay? Alright, so common tones usually is gonna be in the inner part, which are tenor and then the alto. Okay, so let's now start adding the inner part here. So we're starting off from the 3rd last note. Okay, so here G and E. Okay, so G I want to include in the tenor. Okay, so they're close to each other, right? So make sure that they don't have a big lips between the notes for the inner part. And then this one, G and B. So G, try to have repeated notes as much as possible. So G here, and then B here. Okay, okay, and then now G again, and then D here. Okay, all right. Okay, now we'll move on to the first bar, and then try to include the repeated notes if possible in the inner part. Okay, so that's F, and then B. So B, I want to keep it in the tenor, and then F in the alto. This one F and F, so you have a common tones in the alto, and then we're doubling Yeah, we're doubling the fifth, so you're gonna have another F here. Okay, and then finally the first chord. Again, repeated notes, and then D, okay, as a antenna, right? So try to include the repeated notes as much as possible in the inner part. So the boring inner part is a good option, okay? So, yeah, so that's how it works for harmonizing.